Welcome to Recovery Demystified, a show where we explore our relationship to substances from a radical, non-religious, and empowering lens. Our sobriety is not a purity contract. It is an invitation to become curious about ourselves and find our own unique paths to growth and healing. If you've been questioning the role of alcohol or drugs in your life and haven't found the resources that you need, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, it's your friend Early. Welcome back to Recovery Demystified. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. Still not sure what I think about my new introduction. Think there's room for improvement, but it hits the main points, so it'll stay for now. Well, how was your week? World's crazy out there. I'm proud of everyone for surviving. Want you to remember that surviving is enough. And I'm proud of myself for surviving. So, hello, I'm back here again. I had a few rough days. I experienced this thing that I call trauma brain. And trauma brain is just, I don't know, some inner child shit or something. But sometimes I get triggered, right? Like I'll be in a weak moment and then something will trigger the trauma brain. And what happened was last weekend, I had the distinct honor and privilege of being able to go to Give Camp Weekend, which is this really cool thing where a group of volunteers get together to make free websites for nonprofits who otherwise could not afford to pay someone to make a website for them, and who also don't have the IT skills or whatever to make one for themselves. And up until this point, I've just had a shell of a website that just had a landing page so people who went to recoverydemystified.com could see something. And there was just a link to sign up for our newsletter, and that was it. And it's been that way for over a year. And going to this weekend was really cool. And I'm just so deeply grateful that people volunteer their time in this way. I had a team of 3 people that spent their entire weekend at the Center for Nonprofits in Rogers. And I also spent my entire weekend at the Center for Nonprofits in Rogers. And I basically in my life have a pretty full schedule for myself anyways, and adding on 3 days of staring at a computer was really stressful for me. I'm not a big technology person, which I know it's kind of funny now that I'm really excited about making podcasts and stuff. But in general, I'm just out there crawling around in the dirt, looking at toads and flowers, and I'm not a computer person. So doing that, adding 3 extra days of work, doing something that's really draining for me, took a huge toll on me. And then I had a small conflict with a friend who I was supposed to hang out with, who was honestly going through the exact same thing, a weekend completely packed and too much and stress. And then we just had a tiny conflict, and it threw my brain into trauma zone. And it's just some stuck, dissociated fight or flight thing that I then typically get upset with and resist and just wish it would go away. And I almost had to call into work, and it was not cute. And it really teaches me a lesson that there are consequences to not caring for myself physically or respecting my own boundaries with time. And it's good scientific data for myself, studying in my life, that in fact, if I do spend an entire 3-day weekend doing something that is really draining for me, that is going to have sort of severe consequences on my mental health and my ability to have, healthy dialogue and conflict in relationships with other people. So it's important to see that. I don't regret doing the weekend. I had to take one for the team on that, because I can't imagine fundraising enough money to have a real website. And the website looks really good, if I do say so myself. Y'all should check it out. Just www.recoverydemystified.com. There's a nice calendar that's going to have all of our events up on there. My Substack automatically populates as a blog on the website. And you can just, read little descriptions and kind of get the gist of what we're going for at Recovery Demystified. And, at this point, it's still the royal we, which is just me mostly. And then I have my lovely friend Kaylee that does the Instagram and the social media. And then I have another sweet friend TK that does the books and the keeping track of the money, which I couldn't do with the very little money that we have. So yeah, I do have folks that like help me, and I'm super grateful for them. But for the most part, most of what's going on here is just me, and I'm not getting paid. And yeah, so the added stress of that weekend just sort of pushed me over the edge, and I spent a few days like really in a freaking weird place. But I met myself where I was at. I did as much nurturing and self-care as I could. And I just knew that I wouldn't feel that way forever. It was really great to see like a clear cause of why I felt that way, and then be able to have all these self-care skills that I've honed in over the years. And even though I felt like absolute shit, I could still work through that and come out the other side. And actually this morning, a really magical thing happened, which is I have one group chat that I'm in that I love with my friends, where we just take pictures of frogs and talk about the weather. And my friend sent out this picture of a paragraph from a book that he was reading at the library, and I'll read it to you and then I'll explain what happened to me afterwards. So the quote says, "Those of us more favorably inclined towards life in the hills, as were the ancestors of the people in this book, prefer a different story. It seems a city dweller died one spring and went to heaven. He was appalled to see there a wild-eyed man chained to a rock. The newcomer, protesting to St. Peter about the doleful creature, was told that the man was from the Ozarks and that it was spring down there. The only way to keep an Ozarker in heaven when redbud and dogwood bloom and the red horse suckers are shoaling, said the good saint, is to put him in chains." And I read that and like, y'all, I started crying because as I described earlier, I'm not very into technology or anything that's like part of the modern world, really. And I feel so deeply connected to the land that I live on, the woods that I walk in every single day, the plants, the wildlife, all of the beauty around here. And that time that the paragraph was describing in the springtime when the red buds and the dogwoods are blooming is like so deeply important to me. I feel like it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And as my trauma brain incident of the past week was fading and I read this quote and I cried, I just immediately felt connected to the universe, and like I was just out of trauma brain. It was gone. Like the fog was lifted off of me, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm a part of this world and I live in the most beautiful place on earth, and I just survived trauma brain and I feel so good now. I don't know, the little things, you know, you never know what you're going to say to someone and it's going to change their day or change their life or snap them out of trauma brain and get them back into the healed mode or whatever. Anyway, where am I even going with this? That's where I'm at in life today, y'all. Glad to be able to record this when I'm feeling a bit more on the healed side instead of on the traumatized side. But what I really want to talk to y'all about today is what the ethos and the foundation of what I'm trying to work together with Recovery Demystified in general. And I had this idea that what I want to do is go over this packet that we go over as an introduction to folks at our support group. And if you're a regular at the support groups, yes, I'm doing the speech. And I'm like, honestly, I've been doing the same speech since dry January. I had this in a slideshow. I switched it up a little bit when we left the library and I couldn't do the slideshow anymore, and I printed it out into this packet, and now I read out of the packet. And I think I'm growing out of this current iteration of the packet, but I'm still going to go over it with y'all as it is, you know, so you can have a historical document for whoever writes the book on Recovery Demystified in the future, but also just to help me, work through it and grow with it and see the next version of this. Recovery Demystified is still all brand new. It's still just my brainchild. Like I'm a person on a path of healing. Like I'm in recovery too, and I'm the facilitator in this group, and I'm like the creator of this thing that I'm calling Recovery Demystified. But I'm just a drunk and a fucking drug addict that is like also walking a path of recovery and growing and healing and changing alongside everyone. And I fucking climb my ass out of rock bottom, but I'm right here next to you. I'm sticking my arm down to grab for you down there in rock bottom if that's where you're at. And we're all just walking together in this road of healing. Like I'm Joe Schmo working at the fucking pizza restaurant. Like I don't have a degree in anything, and I don't think you need a degree in anything to heal. But I'm not a fucking authority figure. I'm just someone who managed to escape and I want to offer other people a different way to escape, and one that especially doesn't have to do with fucking God or spirituality or any of that. And if you're into that, super happy for you. There's a lot of other places that already exist for you, but for those of us that are not into God, hello. We need this, So basically what I do, we start the group with a land acknowledgement, which I think is really important. I've been reading these books by White Bison Inc. about the history of the indigenous struggle with alcohol use and addiction. And so we start with a land acknowledgement. Currently, where I live out in the Ozarks, we're on stolen land that was previously occupied and still currently, but by Quapaw, Osage, Dakota, and Caddo peoples. And then I like to talk about how historically indigenous folks have created these traditions of healing circles in response to addiction, and the historical records of that go back to the mid 1700s, which is 200 years before AA acted like they invented it. And these traditions are like not well known, and I think in the future I want to do more of a podcast episode on that, because we're over here like near the end of the Trail of Tears where I live at, and there's like a large indigenous population, and I want to make sure that there's culturally appropriate recovery resources for people that have been ignored over the years. So I just, as a white person living on stolen land, I just think it's important to start with a land acknowledgement every time. And then next, okay, I wonder if I should put the packet in the description so y'all can follow along if you want. I think I'll do that. So next, I talk about how at Recovery Demystified that we will never tell you what to do. I don't like being told what to do. And when people tell me what to do, it makes me feel icky and it makes me not want to do that at all. So I don't believe in that. But everything that I talk about, I call it like an invitation. These are things that I find helpful, and maybe you'll find them helpful, and I invite you to try them. But in the end, I think that everyone should just do whatever they want. I invite people to view themselves as a scientist and a test subject in your recovery. And that just basically means like I invite people to study themselves and look at everything as a data gathering mission and record it. We give out free journals at our support groups, and that's just to encourage people to record the data of the things that they learn about themselves, because that addicted voice in our head can convince us to forget about a lot of important stuff that we've learned. And if you write it down, it can create new neural pathways in your brain that help you cement and remember the important things that you've learned. And you can also revisit those journals and go back and just remember something you might have forgotten. So you're a scientist and a test subject, and you're studying yourself. And I also like to encourage people to believe that you are in charge of your own life. Like, you're not powerless. You are already intelligent and whole, and you already know what's best for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do also, because I don't know what's best for you. What works for me might not work for you, and only you know what's best for yourself. So some of the things that I invite people to try in the process. Okay, this is really important. I invite people to begin to identify our inner monologue, and this is our thoughts. This is thinking about our thoughts. And I didn't invent this. It's ancient Eastern traditions of meditation and mindfulness, but I just kind of put my own tweak on it and how I view it with addiction. So basically, whenever we're physically detoxed from a substance and it is physically out of our body, the rest of our battle is going to be within our thoughts. And I invite people to begin to think about, is my thought one that comes from the inner addicted voice? Perhaps is my thought one that is coming from my inner critic? Or perhaps is my thought coming from a fearful voice that doesn't want to change? And then in opposition to voices like those, can I hear when the thought is my core self? And the core self is a part of us who loves ourselves, who wants what's best for us. It is the part of us that's bringing us to a recovery podcast or recovery support group, or it's the part of us that feeds us healthy food or doesn't hit the snooze button. You know what I mean? It's like, if you ask yourself, what would someone who loves themselves do? That is the view of the core self. And in addition to that, the core self is the viewer of all of the other thoughts. So thoughts are created by like a bunch of different places in our brains. And the place where the inner addicted voice, the inner critic, and that fearful voice that doesn't want to change, where those live is in this ancient part of our brain, in our limbic system. And it basically only understands things like dopamine and neurochemicals. And when we start to have an addiction, we are getting like obscene amounts of dopamine from these addictive substances or behaviors. And the inner addicted voice is part of us that sees dopamine as necessary for survival. And in normal circumstances, when we're not talking about addictive substances or behaviors, the dopamine that we get is in these small little amounts. Like say in the wild, when we were ancient peoples or whatever, say we like came upon a food source, raspberries or whatever, we'd get a tiny bit of dopamine. Say we had like a good interaction with people in our friend group, dopamine, right? These are things that help us survive. And then when we get addictive substances, these, really potent things that are just invented by sort of more modern humanity, we get obscene amounts of dopamine. But that inner addicted voice it doesn't have access to all the rest of the more intelligent parts of our brain. All it sees is lots of dopamine means I get to live. And if you take this thing away that gives me lots of dopamine, it means I'm going to die. So the inner addicted voice produces these thoughts that you can hear in your brain, and you can view them as your core self. It will say anything to get you to use the thing that it thinks you need to survive, right? So if we can step back and view that from our core self, and the thoughts produced by our core self are in the uniquely human part of our brain, which is our prefrontal cortex. If we can step back into that uniquely human, intelligent, advanced part of our brain where our personality lives, where we have critical thinking skills, where we have this like intelligent analysis of the world, that is where the viewer of the thoughts lives, right? That's our core self, and that's what wants what's best for us. So we step back into our core self and look and say, oh, any thought that leads to a desire to use is our inner addicted voice. Start to try to distinguish that. A craving, I want to drink. No, I don't want to drink. The inner addicted voice wants to drink. So we begin to distinguish our inner monologue. Our inner critic and the inner addicted voice, they work together too, right? So the inner critic might be like, you're a fucking loser. Why don't you drink anyway? So if instead of being like, oh, I'm so hard on myself, no, I'm not hard on myself. My inner critic is insulting me. If you separate and step back into your core self, every time you recognize and disrupt that thought pattern, you're creating a new neurological pathway. And as you do that more and more, it gets stronger and stronger. And then that becomes a new norm for you. And it'll be so much easier after practicing doing that. The old neural pathways fall away. We don't have to impulsively believe every time we get a craving for a drink. It's no longer I want to drink. It's now the addicted voice wants to drink and I want to heal. Every time you do that, you make a new neural pathway in your brain that gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And the old one gets worn away. And it takes practice and it takes work. But it is something that you can do, and it's free, and you'll get a million chances to do it every single day, every time that inner addicted voice or inner critic or whatever pops up. And then I invite people to start to listen to your inner intuition, which is that core self. And whenever we start to really get a bad addiction and like only listen to that inner addicted voice, it's like a little string that was tied to our intuition gets cut. And all we can listen to is the addicted voice. And we forget what our intuition is. And it's a process, and it takes time to learn what our intuition is. So first, we begin the practice of recognizing the addictive voice and then how that distracts us from our core self and our intuition. And then we try everything. Try things you think you'll like. Try things you think you won't like. Try something you heard on a podcast. Try something you've been meaning to try for 5 years. Go running. Try whatever. Try anything in recovery. Try everything. Ask yourself how you feel in your body and in your mind before you do something. Write it down. Ask yourself how you feel after you did it. And then don't ever let the thought of that fearful voice that doesn't want to change prevent you from trying something new, because you never know what is going to help you in recovery. And it's always going to be trying something different than what you're currently doing. So try everything. Ask yourself how you feel before and ask yourself how you feel after. Learn how you feel, learn about that gut sensation that's leading you in the direction of your intuition, and begin to tie that string back to your intuition and forget what the addicted voice is just constantly babbling and chattering at you. And also, I guess I say in the introduction that our sobriety is not a purity contract. I really don't like the idea that our value in sobriety is based on how many consecutive days we've been sober. So I put in this packet that I think it is so important that if we go back out and use the thing we're addicted to, that we forgive ourselves. We are gentle with ourselves and give ourselves grace. And I do have one friend who hates this because it's really hard to be gentle with yourself. Like, that inner critic is really going to try to whoop your ass if you go out drinking again when you are trying not to. And that makes sense. But the worst thing that can happen is, like, if you have a slip up and if you use the thing you're addicted to, that makes so much sense to me. You're addicted to it, right? Of course, you're going to go back out and use again once in a while, but use it as a fucking data gathering mission. Like, I went back out and drank and I felt like a piece of shit. You know, I had horrible anxiety and I was freaking out. Use it for scientific data, forgive yourself, and then do whatever you want. But my invitation is to not beat yourself up and not get a case of the fuck it's, because as soon as we say fuck it, that is when life is going to go spiraling out of control. But if we instead view it as like, oh, yes, I use the thing I'm addicted to and it still sucks and I learned something, then we can use it like for good and not evil. Okay, then the next page is talking about honoring our differences, which I think is really important in the support group because we're all different from each other, right? Like, and no one knows what we all went through before we got there, and definitely no one knows what our lives are going to be like after we leave. So I think it's important when you're doing a healing circle or when accessing any sort of recovery resources at all to understand that someone's perspective and story can be completely the opposite from yours and still be true and still be valid. And I think it's important to be grateful that we're different from each other because that's what makes life interesting. And I use it as an example oftentimes that for one person, weed might be the answer to their problems, and for the next person sitting next to them, weed might be the cause of all of their problems. And both of those things can be true, and that's okay. And being in a support group where weed is helping one person and harming another is valid and it's fine. And then I like to go over the safer space dynamic. So obviously no one space is entirely safe for all people, but in the Recovery Demystified support groups, we are working towards a safer space. And I've got this quote from the internet from notesbydan.com. It's just like the best description of a safe space that I could find. And from that website, she says, a safe space is a deliberately constructed environment designed to instill a sense of emotional security for those in it. In a safe space, individuals experience a sense of genuine welcome, acceptance, and respect. It is a space free from the shackles of judgment, discrimination, and harassment, creating open channels of communication to promote self-expression, personal growth, and vulnerability. So within the safer space dynamic, basically, it's like mutual respect and care is everyone's responsibility, and it starts with each of us. But for me as a facilitator, if I am clocking that there is like sort of an unsafe or potentially triggering situation going on, I do intervene. It's super rare. But I think it's just important to try to be able to do that. And I also invite people, like, if I'm the problem, if I'm the one creating an unsafe situation, like, please do feel comfortable to try to address it with me or with one of my friends or someone who can come talk to me about it, because I understand that I, as a person in recovery, am just a human. I'm also not immune to creating unsafe spaces. So there's always more places to grow and learn there. But we've never had like big drama in our group, just little things here and there where I've had to intervene and be like, you know, let them finish or whatever. But I do finish the safer space talk by letting people know that people from historically marginalized groups, their safety is the priority at our support groups, because the rest of the world, their safety is not a priority. So I think it's important to make sure that that is stated. And then the last thing I like to talk about in the introduction is leaning into discomfort. And I think this is so important in recovery because discomfort is unavoidable in life. It is a part of it. Something uncomfortable to some extent is going to happen several times a day, every day for the rest of your life. And gosh, one time I heard this Buddhist monk give a speech and it was so moving and I never forgot it. And he was like, okay, imagine that the whole earth is covered in spines and you go out to go walk outside of your house barefoot, and everywhere you go, your feet are just being stabbed by spines. And one thing that we can do in response to this, he was like, you can get 1 million yoga mats and cover the whole world, all the spines in yoga mats, so you can walk out there barefoot. Or the more skillful thing to do would be to put boots on. And then when you're wearing boots, instead of being barefoot, then the spines can't hurt you anymore. And that resonated with me so much. Like, sometimes we go out there mad at the world, trying to just make every single thing different to make ourselves more comfortable, which there's obviously something to be said for that. Like, change needs to happen. Bad things are happening, and they're fighting back is never wrong. But at the same time, if we can create more resilience within ourselves, then we are going to be more effective in our work of changing things in the world. And also, it's just going to become more tolerable and more survivable for us if we do have the resilience skills needed to survive a world that is made of thorns. So we need to all put on our fucking metaphorical boots, right? And in recovery, our metaphorical boots are learning how to tolerate being uncomfortable. You can change a lot of stuff in your life. You can get a better job. You can dump your abusive partner. You can move into a different living situation. Like, there's things you can do to make your life less uncomfortable, but uncomfortable situations will happen regardless of the amount of changes that you make. So learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable is like such an important skill. And a lot of what goes on with addiction is using substances to suppress feelings of discomfort. Like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm just going to drink about it, right? And if instead of using substances every time we feel uncomfortable to try to suppress it or make it go away, if instead we experience the discomfort, find healthy coping skills to walk alongside of us as we experience this discomfort, but face it, name it, and go through it, every time we do that, our brain learns that being uncomfortable is not a life or death emergency, and that we are strong and that we can survive things. And so we get a little bit uncomfortable and we live through it. And then our brain gets stronger and stronger, and we get more confident in ourselves, and we get really comfortable being uncomfortable, which sounds weird, but it's a fucking amazing life skill. And I super invite everyone to learn how to be uncomfortable, because eventually you get so good at tolerating discomfort that the absolute most horrifying thing possible can happen in your life, and you don't even consider taking a drink or using a substance to suppress it. It's just like not even a thought, and it's because we get so fucking strong, and it's awesome. And then I have this, maybe I'll put it as a thumbnail or something in the episode, but I have this illustration, and I didn't invent it, but I've really latched onto it, where it's like a bullseye, and in the center of the bullseye is our safe zone or our comfort zone. And that's where we reside in with our addiction. That's where we are most of the time. And then when we get pushed outside of that, then we're in what I call the growth zone. And that's when we are just a bit uncomfortable, but it's survivable. And as long as we can like chill in the growth zone and survive it and not suppress it, not run away from it, that's where we're going to experience healing. And then further outside of the growth zone, in the next outer zone of the bullseye, is the panic zone. And that is when we are pushed way too far outside of our safe zone or our comfort zone, and we are in fight or flight. It's like an entirely different physiological, neurological experience. And if we are in the panic zone, it's just important to recognize that that is the case and use physical grounding techniques to bring us back into a manageable state of mind, because we are not going to grow in the panic zone, just as we're not going to grow in the safe zone. So it's just important to recognize, like, oh, am I in the growth zone? Am I in the panic zone? Or am I in the safe zone? And yeah, just learn how to be uncomfortable and recognize it. And actually, I just started reading a book, and I bookmarked a little like a couple sentences about being uncomfortable that really resonated with me and sounded a lot like addiction. And I'm going to review this entire book in the November recovery resources list. So until then, it's a secret. But she says, Some people have an identity tied to sickness. Others fear true wellness because it is the unknown, and the unknown is unpredictable. There is comfort in knowing exactly what your life will look like, even if that reality is making you sick. Our minds are familiarity-seeking machines. The familiar feels safe. That is, until we teach ourselves that discomfort is temporary and a necessary part of transformation. All right, so that is like the long drawn out blah, blah, blah version of the introduction that I do at our support groups. I try to like shorten it down so it's more manageable and give people time to talk during the group. So it's not just me babbling on. Like, I literally do not want this to be about myself at all. Ooh, what was I saying? I just had to go outside because I had to let one of my dogs back in. I'm recording at home again. I have a dog that had a stroke, and now he can go out the dog door, but then he gets confused and doesn't know how to come back in. And so he just goes out and goes potty and then is like, bro, let me back in. Sweetie. Okay, I think I was saying that I don't want to take up too much space in our support groups because I don't want it to be about me. It's a little bit about me because I exist and I'm also on the healing path of recovery, but mostly I just want to give space for people to process their own shit, but also give them just like a taste of what is going on in my brain and what I think is really important in healing and the things that helped me recover ultimately. So it's just a little bit of food for thought as we enter into this like new space that we're creating together as Recovery Demystified. And you better believe it's going to grow and change just as I'm always growing and changing. And something that I really want to add in there is an invitation to focus on physical health, because our brain and our body are not two different things, and our physical health is having a direct impact on our mental health. And if we can focus on like our basic needs, sleep, water, food, movement, rest, and things of that nature, that I think that could really be like a super important part of focus on our recovery. So that is something I'm mulling over, of course. And anyway, y'all, I'm recording. It's like 8:30 at night and there's all these crickets outside and it just sounds so beautiful and serene. Usually I would shut the window to record to try to get good sound quality or whatever, but man, I just couldn't shut it tonight because it sounds so beautiful. My mom called the other day and she stops and goes, "Are those crickets?" Like she could hear them in the background, and I thought that was so beautiful. I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but a lot of times it's like I'm thinking and my thoughts are so loud that I forget that there's crickets or birds or whatever noises are happening around me. And then if I take a break and just like take a breath and think about my surroundings, I'm like, wow, I was just completely deaf to these crickets because I was thinking about something that didn't fucking matter. But yeah. What sounds are going on around you right now? If you open the window, can you hear bugs? Can you hear the bugs here? Anyway, I did it again, y'all. Went on babbling on and on for half an hour somehow. I have a secret fear that eventually I'm going to run out of things to say, but evidence has shown that I have no problem talking about recovery at length. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe go hit that 5-star button if you like my podcast. And I love you guys. If you got it rough today, I think you're fucking cool for listening to this. I think you're a badass. I think you're powerful. And if I close my eyes, I can see your path of healing. It's there. You're doing a great job. Your survival is enough, and I fucking love you. You can do this. Have a good night, y'all. May you be happy and free. Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. Logan Bragg wrote our beautiful theme music. We are entirely supported by donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. Your tax-deductible donations can be made to our Venmo or to our PayPal at Recovery Demystified. May you be happy and free, dear listener. you.